Hello again, everybody, and happy Thursday to you. Do you remember the story of Daedalus and Icarus that we told last assembly? It reminded me of my stone painting and how I like feathers so much that I also like to find perfectly shaped stones that will make lovely leaf or feather paintings. And this is one of the ones that I have in my office, which is rather nice, inspired by feathers. So I promised you today something a bit different from our Greek myths book. I promised to talk to you about a Greek myth that was linked to how spiders came to be. And it's all about the special gift that spiders around their web weaving, and it is really amazing because the weather has been cold and frosty recently. If you are really lucky when you're walking up to school or going on a walk during the day, you might come across some really frosty spider webs on bushes or trees or on bits and pieces in your garden, and it always stops me in my tracks because I just think it's amazing how a very small creature can actually manage to weave with such beautiful silk, something so amazing. And of course, spiders use them to catch their prey, don't they? And today's story is all about what the Greeks thought about how spiders came to be. And somebody said to me yesterday, Mrs. Scarterfield, are these stories true? Well, what I will say is that the ancient Greeks, just like many other civilizations, made up or had lots of stories to explain how things were formed, how things like the seasons and mountains and everything else were formed, because like most cultures, there are still many unanswered questions about how things came to be. So most civilizations come up with stories and ideas and beliefs about how things were made. And this is the ancient Greek story today. It's a little bit gruesome about how spiders came to be. And the character's name in this is a girl, actually. She's called Arachne. And for those of you who are really good at science, you will know that spiders are part of the arachnid family. They're not insects, because insects all have 6 legs. They're part of the arachnid family in biology, and they have 8 legs. So I think that name came from this character's name, Arachne, because that's this girl's name. Let's see what happens to her. Arachne's fingers moved so quickly across the loom they were a blur. She hummed as she wove, passing the shuttle expertly back and forth, and onlookers jostled for space as they watched the tapestry take shape. In no time at all, it was finished. "What do you think of that?" she said, handing the piece to a shy nymph who had ventured out from the forest to see the famous girl at work. The tapestry showed animals playing among the trees and had a border of intertwined leaves all around. "Oh, it's lovely," breathed the nymph. "You must be better at weaving than anyone else in the whole world." Arachne nodded proudly. "I think I am, and I think I'm better than all the gods too, actually," she boasted. A frail voice spoke up from the crowd. "You can't be better than the goddess Athena. She's famous for her weaving, and you're only human after all." "Well, I can weave better than she can," said Arachne. The old lady who had spoken stepped forward. "That's a rather bold claim," she said, her voice sharpening. "I'd take it back if I were you. You never know who's listening." "Well, I wouldn't care if Athena herself could hear me," Arachne said scornfully. "I stand by what I say." The old woman threw back the hood of her cape and straightened her back. The wrinkles on her face faded until her skin was smooth and glowing, and she grew taller and her hair became glossy. Before the crowd's very eyes, she turned into the goddess Athena. Everyone bowed their heads respectfully, apart from Arachne, who just stared at the goddess, first flushing red and then turning very pale. "Do you dare repeat that to my face?" Athena asked. An angry goddess is a terrifying sight, but Arachne was far too proud to back down. Her voice wavered a little as she spoke. "I can weave better than you," she said. Athena's eyes narrowed. "Then let's have a competition, and you can prove it to everyone." Arachne nodded, swallowing nervously. She stood up from her loom and gestured to the stool. "You can go first if you like," she said. Athena sat down, pushed back her sleeves and began to weave. As everyone watched, the threads started to form a beautiful, intricate scene. It showed arrogant humans being put in their place by the glorious gods. The figures were so lifelike that when she wove Zeus throwing a thunderbolt in anger, people in the crowd ducked, thinking the bolt was about to hit them. Beneath her fingers, the thread somehow glowed brighter than any ordinary thread. And when she had finished, the image shimmered as though it was inlaid with gold and silver. It really was truly amazing. There, Athena said triumphantly, and she stood up to let Arachne take her place at the loom. Arachne took a deep breath and began to weave. She worked intently without saying a word, and as she wove, people gasped at her skill. She had never produced anything more wonderful or more daring than this. The scene she wove was every bit as intricate as Athena's, but it showed brave heroes challenging foolish gods. Tiny ships sailed valiantly across the seas while Zeus stirred up a storm, looking all the world like a giant sulky toddler. When Arachne had finished, she turned to the crowd. "Well," she said. There was no denying her skill. The tapestry was every bit as good as Athena's, if not better, but nobody was fool enough to say so. Athena's face was so menacing, like a thundercloud. "Your arrogance, Arachne, will be your downfall," she shouted. She tore the tapestry from the loom and ripped it into tiny shreds in front of Arachne's face. Then she seized the girl by the throat and lifted her up into the air. "How dare you challenge a goddess and expect to win?" she hissed. "I'll see to it that you will never weave again." Arachne's face turned ashen as she gasped for breath. "Oh, please," she said hoarsely. "Weaving is all I've ever wanted to do. It's all I can do." Athena dropped the girl in a crumpled heap on the floor. Fine," she said. "You may continue weaving, but you certainly won't be able to boast about it anymore." She rapped the girl on the top of her head with her knuckles, and at once a terrible transformation began to take place. Can you guess? Arachne's arms and legs shrank back into her body, leaving only her 8 long fingers along her sides. Her head squashed into her torso, which became squat and round. Her nose disappeared entirely, and her eyes multiplied until she had 8 pairs of them in a row. Her skin turned dark, and she sprouted hairs. And she shrank and shrank and shrank until she was no bigger than a palm of a child's hand. Arachne had turned into a spider. She scuttled away into the shadows, and everyone thought they'd seen the last of her. But the very next morning a nymph came running from the forest. "Come and see," she shouted excitedly. The villagers followed her back to the forest, where the nymph showed them a beautiful woven pattern hanging between the branches. The thread was so delicate a mere breath could break it, and the pattern was dotted with dewdrops that glittered in the sunlight diamonds. The skill was unmistakable. "Arachne the spider has woven her first web," the nymph announced. From that day forward, evidence of Arachne's weaving has been found all over the world. So many webs have been found in so many far-flung places that people say Arachne must have passed her skill on to lots of other spiders too. And that's the story of how spiders came to be. I'll just show you the picture of the goddess Athena. There she is, putting that curse onto Arachne so that she was turned into a spider. But she still let her carry on with her weaving. In ancient Greek times, it seems that they didn't do very well to boast that you were any better than gods, which is interesting, isn't it? So there we go. I've had lots of Greek myths to enjoy this week, and it's really interesting how it all pulls forward into things that are around now. You see, the more you read, the smarter you get, the more you have to think about. So that's Thursday's assembly, and I will see you for our Good Work assembly on Friday. Have a great Thursday, everybody. Bye for now.